Expressing and talking about emotions and our feelings is key to being able to share this reality, which is common wherever we go. So the sooner we're able to learn how to articulate that, I think is better.
If you speak out of rage or anger with passion, that's the emotion you're writing in this moment. It's not you who's going to be speaking, it's that rage. But if you go take a mindful walk, then it comes down, and by the time you return, you can still talk and express, but you will be talking from a different way. And that way, that relationship is safe.
People bring out different sides of us and they impact our body and our mind differently. Just knowing that, we can figure out where we should be investing our time, our heart. And that's the only way we can know how are they making us feel inside.
That element of being able to show up in my vulnerable self when it is safe to do so is my superpower, because it helps create an environment of empathy and sympathy. I'm very emotional.
We have become to a point where we are so diplomatic and we try to check everybody's box that we lose ourselves, because if I think, what you will think, what will she think, what will she think, then I'm losing what do I think.
Human beings are social creatures. We need that sense of connection, and the way we connect by talking about how we feel. Got to find the right people to express yourself, to make sure that they create a safe space for you. Your feelings are validated by that person and you don't feel like they're just like too bad. Hello everyone. Welcome to the Dreamcatcher podcast, a place where your dreams can find a voice. I'm your host, Celine Chenoy. Thank you to all of you who return every week to tune in to become a better version of yourself. Make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't already, and rate our show if you enjoy this episode. We are currently living in an era that celebrates self-expression. Whether online or in person, we are encouraged to share our thoughts and emotions. Unlike previous generations, we now have the freedom to openly express how we feel. While there are numerous advantages to sharing our emotions with others, overdoing it can have its drawbacks. That's why it's essential to strike a balance between emotional control and expressiveness, taking into account our personal preferences and the context we find ourselves in. To delve deeper into this subject, I have invited Sahar Milani, an experiential brand specialist and host of the Mindful Makers podcast, and Laura Roche, an MC, podcaster, and mindfulness and self-compassion expert, to join me for an in-depth discussion. In this discussion, we'll examine the various aspects of emotional expression, weighing its advantages and disadvantages. We'll also share practical strategies for achieving a healthy balance, helping you lead a happier, more balanced, and fulfilling life. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second panel discussion in the special series on the Dreamcatcher podcast. I'm happy to have back on the show Sahar Milani and Laura Roche. Today, we're diving into a very important topic that's on the minds of many people, and that is emotional expression. More specifically, how we can find a healthy balance between controlling our emotions and expressing them in a way that feels authentic. So glad to have both of you here. How are you doing?
Thanks for having us back on the show.
Yeah.
So happy to be here. Thank you.
How are you feeling? I think we can set the stage for our discussion by kind of checking in with how are we feeling, where we are emotionally right now.
I'd say I feel quite grounded. I had a lovely beach walk this morning with a friend. So we did a lot of grounding exercises, which was very, very needed, because had you asked me yesterday, I would have said frazzled.
I hear you. Okay. So you needed that grounding.
Yeah, I think my body was really calling for it.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that I'm the first to overlook when you've got a really busy and hectic schedule.
Yes.
And one thing goes into the other, and before you know it, like days and weeks are passing. So we decided to have our morning meeting on the beach instead of a coffee shop. And it was a game changer. And I think I'm going to start integrating that more and more into my work schedule, having beach walk meetings.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that. Laura.
I love doing that. Not so grounded, to be honest. I am in one of those days, and today I woke up like sad. And I was like, why am I so sad? And then I realized, it's my hormones. Hello. So I'm just honoring it and trying to, and a friend called me, how are you? And I said, I'm wonderful. Because even though it's not what I'm feeling, I'm trying to be more positive and just understand that as women, we have cycles and our hormones, they go around, and we have to accept it that some days are higher, some days are lower. So I'm just honoring my body and accepting what it is.
Yeah, that's a big one. Cycles do impact how we feel. Absolutely.
100%.
Let's see. I feel a bit sleep deprived. I woke up really early in the morning today. So I am powered by caffeine right now. And I think I've been very introspective the past couple of days, thinking about the next phase of my life. And I've had certain things that have come up in my personal life that has really got me thinking about, okay, what's important to me? And I had to really check in with, my values and how I can kind of live in alignment with what's important to me. So yeah, introspective is the right word for how I feel right now. So
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
thank you. All right. So let's start out by talking about why this topic matters today. Why should we be discussing emotional expression at this time?
Because being aware of your feelings and how to handle and express them can make or break you. If you have a tantrum, it will be accepted if you are 5 years old. If you are 35 years old, people will automatically cancel you, right? And that is emotional expression. So you may be feeling it, but how do you do when you feel your feels? I mean, what do you do when you feel your feels? I think that's so important. And well, that comes with emotional intelligence. And the book by Daniel Goleman is one of the biggest bestsellers ever. So I think people want to know about this topic.
We globally have this issue of stress, anxiety, and then I think when we looked at levels of PTSD, because I was researching this for one of my shows where we talk about trauma, within anyone's lifetime, 70% of people will globally go through some traumatic event. Not all of them will turn into PTSD, but still expressing and talking about emotions and our feelings is key to being able to share this reality, which is common wherever we go. And it's becoming a common language. So the sooner we're able to learn how to articulate that, I think is better.
That's mind-boggling.
Yeah, I really took a moment to process that when I came across those two stats, because it really highlighted to me the importance of these conversations, but the inner work. And for example, the awareness that you just talked about, where you knew that, okay, it's my hormones. If you had not had that language, that in a dictionary, would you have gone in a different direction, perhaps? Would you have beaten yourself up about it? Or some people would take it out on the others. It's having that language, that dictionary, that's really going to help us to know when to articulate what's a safe space, et cetera, which I'm sure we're going to unpack today.
Right.
And
And that is emotional intelligence, right? And that's not something we're taught about in school. Well, nowadays, I think they are prioritizing it, and they are making sure kids become more tuned into their inner world. I don't know if you've seen those cute charts with those different faces, like, how are you feeling today? You know, they've got the ones that smile, the ones that are frowning. So I think they're starting to build it into the education system, but that's only recently. You know, it's people in the personal growth field like us who reach out for resources and try to find out how to decipher what we're feeling and what would be the best modality and tools that can help us manage ourselves better. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see, I don't know if you two have watched Inside Out. one and two.
Oh,
but
yes.
basically, that's such a great way to teach not only children but adults about emotional expression and the different parts that we have within us and
Yes.
the purpose
I
that
love
they have,
that.
right?
And what I love most is like these are like they can be so dissociated, all these different parts of us. But what that movie brings home is that you can actually bring it all together
Yeah.
and become a whole person. Like you don't have to like alienate different parts of you. You can all bring it together and work as a team because each emotion plays a role.
Exactly. And it's
Yeah.
almost when they get exiled that they don't feel, I'm talking they as in the emotions,
The emotions,
that they
yes.
don't feel seen or heard. And therefore there can be this imbalance within that causes other reactions, which we see in both of the, both in Inside Out 1 and 2. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think living in an age of social media, the internet, and AI, it can be easy to invalidate how we feel. We become so technology driven. I think that personal touch, that having that community also, that where you're facing people, you know, in real life, I think that's all gone. So we don't have anyone to actually communicate our emotions to. You know, kids are doing it on TikTok now. You know, they're all in their fields and they're shooting all these reels where they're just pouring their heart out. But that doesn't really help. You know, you need to talk to another human being to actually feel heard and seen, because human beings are social creatures. That's where instinctually we need that sense of connection. And the way we connect is by talking about how we feel.
Yeah.
You know?
We are mammals. We used to live in tribes, and we need the tribe. We need the people. And I feel when you were reading the stats, I was thinking the antidote to that is community. The antidote to anxiety, depression, the stress is just that feeling of common humanity as well. Because when you said yesterday you were not feeling well, then it gives me permission to say, today I'm sad, and that's okay. And maybe today she's happy, but she will see like, okay, it's not bad, it's not wrong to say what's going on with me and share it.
Yeah.
As long as it's not invasive, I guess.
Yeah. And I think the key to that is noting that you chose to share in a place of self and ownership, but you didn't start the show like bawling your eyes out, although you might have felt like it and you might have wanted to. But like, how would that have served our discussion if, you know, we're here at like half an hour into the show and Laura is still wiping her tears away? Like, where is that going to help people? You know, we can take that outside and I'll give you shoulder to cry on, but we're here to show, you know, do you know what I mean? So that's that context of reshaping of how we feel safe and where and when to unload in a way that serves a purpose, both for yourself and for the person that you're sharing with. They can help you.
Yeah, Brené Brown talks about this. You know, she in her groundbreaking studies on vulnerability, you got to find the right people to express yourself, to make sure that they create a safe space for you and that your feelings are validated by that person and you don't feel like they're just like, oh, too bad. You know, you have people who just brush it off or are uncomfortable with you revealing your feelings. And I'm sure you've experienced that in your life where people get a bit awkward. It's like, oh, okay, like, why is she sharing this with me? Like, I've experienced that.
To me, it really helped me. I was doing my master's degree on mindfulness for organizations. So we had so many lessons, everything on personal development, right? I loved it. And one was emotional intelligence. And there is this PhD in Spain. His name is Rafael Vizquerra. And he explains so well the difference between emotions and feelings. And he said that the emotion is when he felt on a school trip when they went to an amusement park and he rode the roller coaster. And the emotion, it was first the anticipation coming up, then the being up, then the fear, and then the relief after that. And he was saying, and he walks you through it, right? And you feel with him. And he said, these are emotions because they are temporary and they come and go. I ride the wave and that's an emotion. Whereas a feeling, and we shouldn't pay that much attention to them. We should be aware that they are like the loop of a roller coaster. Whereas a feeling is an emotion that has been sustained for long in time. So even though today I was feeling a little bit sad, I knew it was a part of the loop of the roller coaster, and I will feel better.
Yeah,
Well,
just write it out.
I just feel better now, you know?
Yeah.
It's just by, you just write it out, exactly.
Just write it out.
And to me, understanding that, it really helped me to realize, okay, one thing is emotion, another thing is a feeling. They're all valid, but to understand what is temporary and what is staying with me for the long run.
That's really interesting. Did he talk about what is happening physiologically when we are experiencing an emotion and when we're experiencing a feeling?
Probably he did. But I can't
Because I know there's biochemistry involved with our feelings. So I think having a sense of what is, like, you knew that it was your hormones that was giving you the blues.
Yeah.
So I think having that knowledge of what is going on inside on a physiological level will give us some guidance about how to deal with it. So
I think it definitely does have an impact on the physiological side as well. And anyone with an Aura ring or that tracks their biodata will be able to, if they really pay attention to the graph, see the switch depending on whether their nervous system is regulated or not, or whether they feel cues of safety around them or not, and where their stress levels go into, whether they feel relaxed or engaged. And that can be very telling. It's not a very, let's say, definitive all the time, but I've noticed it on my biodata when I'm around people that make my nervous system feel safe. I drop into restored, and I stayed there for a really long time. And it was fascinating to me to see how emotions like the ones that I feel around those people impact me physiologically.
yeah, that is so key.
Yeah.
Because people bring out different sides of us and they impact our body and our mind differently. Just knowing that, we can figure out where we should be investing our time, our heart, and our,
Knowing
part
that
of us.
and listening to that, because sometimes we don't listen to our body.
Or like
Because our body
toxic
tells
people or narcissists. I think that's the only way we can know how are they making us feel inside.
Yeah.
If it doesn't feel good, there's probably a reason why, right? Love doesn't hurt, as they say. It should feel good.
Mm.
A question that a lot of people have is, how much is too much?
When I think about it, my immediate thought is that it is relationship and context dependent. Because when we have or are in front of somebody that we feel safe with, I know we've talked about this already, but also our relationship has that history to it, we know that they're able to handle our expression because they know us in a way that a stranger off the street might not. But on the other hand, sometimes it's easier to share to a complete stranger as well.
That is so true.
And that is why therapy works well, or meeting someone in a coffee shop and
or on a
randomly...
plane.
Yeah, you have the craziest conversations with strangers sometimes because you just, you have these intimate moments of connection that you can share with. But again, they are appropriate to that moment. So
that is
therefore
so
context,
interesting.
context in that moment is what serves, not the relationship, because you don't have a relationship with them apart from the fact that you might just vibe with this person. So I always look at that, the context and the relationship. Whether it's too much, something inside of me wants to say it can't be too much, because when those aspects exist, then you are held and you are able to be seen and heard. And it's a relief, it's a release. It's something that is necessary for you in order to excavate something really important or dark or whatever you're going through. So how can that be too much? If I think about my nearest and dearest, and if they've got something that they really need to let go of, I will always be that safe space for them, and I will hold them if I can in best way possible. So therefore, for me, it's never too much when it comes to them.
Interesting.
But I think you said the key word when you say if I can.
Yeah,
because sometimes we don't have the capacity in that moment and place.
100%.
And I was just thinking, and also before sharing, like I love Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh. He says, whenever you are feeling like anger, or rage inside of you, go for a walk alone. And that to me was life changing. Such a simple sentence. Whenever you're feeling anger or rage, go for a walk. Because if you speak, for example, out of rage or anger with passion, that's the emotion you're writing in this moment. It's not you who's going to be speaking. It's that rage.
Yeah.
Such a good point.
But if you go, take a mindful walk, very slowly, even it's burning inside, you walk, then it comes down, and by the time you return, you can still talk and express, but you will be talking from a different way. And that way, that relationship is safe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, because these people are the closest to us, we think everything is fine. Everything has a past, and not everything has a past to take care of relationships.
Sort of like emotional hygiene, right?
Yeah.
Just taking care of yourself and making sure you don't overburden the other person, because they may not be like the container, like they may not be big enough to accept everything that you have to share in that moment. I mean, I remember one of my closest friends from high school, she was going through a very difficult breakup, and I was there for her the whole time. I was listening to her cry, I was listening to her mope, and obviously I'll be there for her. But then she could not stop. She went on for days and days, and I was like, I got really, really drained out from listening to her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I told her, look, I really feel for you. I'm your friend. I'm always going to support you, and I have your best interests at heart. But I said, you need help.
Yeah.
You need a therapist. So I think having that awareness to know that when it would be too heavy for the other person that you're dealing with, there are some people who are who are willing to listen, but at the same time, they may not be able to express. They feel guilty to say that, hey, this is getting a bit too much now.
Yeah.
You're flooding us. And it kind of enters their system then. So I have a slightly different take on this. I feel like we need to.
I have this little habit that I have when I want to, before I offload or share, or if I'm going to enter a conversation that is emotionally charged and I need presence, I always check in and say, where are you at percentage wise? Like, because I'm at 20% like in my tank. And if that person is like, I think Brené Brown spoke about this as well, if she's anywhere under 80%, her and her husband just park it for a while until they have, either one of them is at 80. If one of them's sharing, the other one's not anything below 80. I'm not sure about the number, but it was something like that. But for me, it is 80% for sure. Because then at least if I am able to show up and be there for that person and create that safe space, I want to be able to be in self, to tell them when too much is too much or we need to take a break. And if I'm not, then I'll probably act or say something in a way that doesn't serve that moment. It's this yin and yang, this night and day, the moving and the ebbing and the flowing.
To me, it also helped me when I understood the concept of deep listening and compassionate talking to somebody. So sometimes people, they are sad and you just need to deep listen to them. And to me, it really helped me to, if it's the other person, if I have the capacity, listen. And if it's too much, I breathe within myself while that person talks. Like I focus, instead of putting the focus on the other person, I put the focus on me and in my breathing. So I'm listening, but I'm taking care of myself internally, regulating my breath. And that way I'm deep listening to this person. And whenever I need, I will practice loving speech, not compassionate loving speech. And then I will say whatever it needs to be said. And sometimes loving speech is also saying, I hear you, I see you, but at this moment, that's a bit of enough for me. Can we change the subject? Or let's go, or let's do something that will help you get grounded, but also like setting the boundary.
Yeah.
That's a really, really great point you make there. And I think a lot of people need to learn that, setting those boundaries when someone is oversharing. So thank you for sharing that. Where do both of you lie in the continuum of emotional expression? Do you think you're more reticent, controlled, or do you think you're more expressive, or does it vary?
I think it's clear that I'm very expressive.
I wanted you to say it.
I'm very expressive, and that's my nature. And
Yeah.
I've learned to come in terms with it and understanding that that is okay as well.
Yeah.
You know, also you learn with the age, you learn how to regulate it better. But you know, the things that I felt before that, oh my God, I'm too much, or this or that. Now people actually like me for that. And I get clients and I get work because of that, because they tell me you're authentic. And we like that. So I think it's finding the sweet balance between being expressive without being overburdening.
Yeah. And you think you've gotten better at that as you've
I think I've matured. On it. No, but really, I feel like finally I'm getting the spot, you know? And as much as you can do mindfulness, therapy, all the internal work, sometimes some things just come slowly. It's like as you plant the seed and then it starts growing.
Do you think it's because of your personality, your culture, or a combination of that?
I wouldn't blame my culture.
Not blame. I mean, I know that you know, the Latin culture, they tend to be more expressive.
I mean, all Mediterraneans. All Mediterraneans, we are very expressive, definitely.
Yes.
When I lived in Vienna for 3 years and a half in Austria, it's a completely different character. And it was just different. It was a cultural shock, right?
Yeah.
But yes, I think there's something to do with it, with the culture.
Yeah.
And then it's also the personality, our physiology. Then I understood something with my DNA that makes me, you know, have this or that, the way our body releases cortisol or not. And then when you realize and you're aware of these things, again, how do I take responsibility for that?
Yeah.
And how do I hold this horse to make it the amazing animal that it is, but contained?
But contained, yeah.
I think it's finding the balance in life, being aware, first of all, and then finding balance.
Yeah, and accepting yourself.
Like
you've accepted that this is what's true to you. Being an expressive woman, a passionate woman, is what feels true to you. And that's okay. Yeah. What about you, Sahar?
You took me straight back to my childhood with that question. Like I immediately saw little Sahar. And I've always been very emotionally expressive. I think that through conditioning, I quickly adapted to try my best to control them from a young age because of various life challenges that happened. And I spent most of my adulthood unlearning that conditioning to return to my essence. And it's really interesting that despite the conditioning that did take place, my nature was still always emotional. Everybody always knew where they stood with me. I was always very clear with when I was sad. I would cry when I was happy. It was just, the tears would flow. You would see it on my face. And even though in certain moments that was critiqued as a sign of weakness, I now understand that element of being able to show up in my vulnerable self when it is safe to do so is my superpower, because it helps me connect. It helps create an environment of empathy and sympathy when appropriate and when needed. And I think that, I would say heart on my sleeve. Like I'm very, very emotional.
That's interesting, because to me, it seems like you are quite measured in how you express those emotions.
I was thinking the same.
Yeah.
Perhaps because we're more in a professional
Absolutely,
And
but also you don't know me.
Yeah,
right?
I don't know you. That's
you
what I'm
sat
saying.
in a
First-
studio with me 2 times.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would say the beauty of being a human is that you have multiple layers
Absolutely.
and they can come out in different forms at different times, you know?
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
Well, I think I fall somewhere in the middle. I used to be an oversharer when I was younger in my 20s. I feel like I used to be an open book and people used to take advantage of that. And then I learned to be selective about who I share my life, you know, the personal details of my life with now. So I am a very emotional, very passionate woman. I feel things extremely deeply. So I had to learn how to tame it and control the horse over time, and more importantly, how to express it to the world. And I think creativity was a really huge outlet for me. The more I started writing, doing the podcast, you know, doing posts on Instagram, just sharing what I feel, it has been very healing for me to offload that. When I didn't have that outlet, I didn't know what to do with myself. You know, then that's when I would overshare and tell people, you know, people who didn't deserve to know my things about my life, and who some of them took advantage of that. And so yeah, I've learned to temper my emotions and find the right channels to express them, and in a way that would not just benefit me but benefit others. So yeah.
Do you guys ever feel like, I sometimes feel like, bless my 20-year-old self. Bless her.
my
I
gosh.
love you. Bless you. You deserve so much love. Don't you ever feel like that?
I feel like a strict parent though sometimes. I'm just like, you shouldn't have done that. I've had to work on self-compassion and forgiveness a lot. Yeah.
I have, yeah, I resonate with what Laura said. Like, I feel, oh, come here, I want to just give you a big cuddle and tell you that it's going to be okay. And you should tell that person that crossed the line that they crossed the line, you know?
Yeah.
And stop trying to, you know, wash over things. Like, your feelings are valid and
That's
they're
beautiful.
not a sign of weakness, and you're going to be okay. Like, nothing's forever.
That's beautiful. I've taken note of that.
Beautiful. Yeah, I wanted a replay of that.
But it's interesting. I mean, when you think about people, all of them have different emotional capacities. Like, some people feel very deeply. Some people are more in the shallow end of the pool.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that?
Yeah, it's human nature, I think.
And I think it's also, that one, I think it really is biology and physiology.
Yeah, because
But like, we're women are more, we tend to feel or to express more our feels or to be
and
more
certain
attuned.
cultures too. Like, when I was living in like Sweden and going to the Nordic countries, I don't want to generalize here, but I felt like sometimes they would not really get my emotional frequency sometimes, and I had to like somehow match them where they're at. I don't know if you experienced that with people from certain cultures. Even like the opposite sex, men tend to be more contained because of the way they're socialized, right? Don't
Yeah, conditioning.
like
What
generations
what they
also,
brought up,
older
yeah.
generations, they were also
To me,
much more reserved. And yeah.
I learned so much with my endocrinologist,
Yeah.
you know, the one that takes care of your hormones, because I have a condition, and she explained to me, when you take this medication, you are like this, but when you don't take it, it spikes. And she was explaining to me, basically she was explaining that men, they don't have cycles, they don't have hormonal cycles, they don't have periods like we do. So men are always more or less in the same level the whole time. Their hormones don't fluctuate as much. And for us women, we do have 28-day cycles if you're lucky.
Yeah.
So she was like, being a woman is harder because we have these cycles that condition us and they move us and they affect her. Of course, they affect our mood, they affect on the mood swings. Our body gets inflamed, then it comes back to normal. She was like, of course, it's easier being a man.
Yeah.
And it helped me so much to understand, okay, today I'm sad, it's fine. It's my hormones.
But you know, the suicide rate among men are extremely high right now, young men particularly. So I'm wondering if them containing their feelings or not having that awareness of their emotions, is that causing that? Not able to decode their feelings. And
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I
Sure.
cannot cite the study. I'll probably put it in the show notes, but it is known that the suicide rate is climbing among that particular demographic group. And that's very sad. And I'm wondering if it has something to do with them bottling up their feelings and not feeling comfortable enough to share that with somebody.
Yeah, that's a whole other show, honestly, because there's so much to unpack there. You know, I don't know if you've watched the Netflix series Adolescence recently.
It is. But everyone's talking about it.
Yeah, it really shines a light on not just men, but I think the nature of growing up in today's world and the mixed messages that we can receive and how they can be misinterpreted. And as I mentioned earlier on in the show, like with peaks of PTSD and anxiety and stress in the world, both from multiple different kinds of ages, it does not surprise me, but I do hope and I feel hopeful that conversations like this will help inform and inspire others to show more compassion towards each other and to themselves, and to ask for help when they need. What you mentioned earlier about the cycles in female hormones reminded me of this great BBC podcast that I got into a few years ago called 28 Days Later. I think it's called that, which basically talks about the female cycle and goes into depth of each season of what happens. And they mentioned that men have daily cycles. So in the morning when they wake up, their testosterone peaks when they're like really active and they're doing loads of great things. And then slowly towards the end of the day it drops. So if you want to have a conversation with them, generally do it in the first half of the day when their hormones, so they just kind of do it on a daily basis and they renew. But like you said, that means that they experience life in a different way. And their seasons are more stagnant in that sense. They're daily seasons rather than a 28-day broken up season.
I never knew that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I love that podcast because it taught me so much about my own body, but also understanding why I feel certain things at certain times and not being afraid of that anymore. Or not being ashamed of it. I think there was a lot of shaming when we were growing up around female hormones.
I think so. It's something you just didn't talk about.
Or people used it as a joke. I found that it was always like a joke, like, it's the time of the month. Like, no, actually it's not, but I'm just expressing anger right now, you know? So it was eye-opening for me and educational,
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to announce the upcoming launch of my new book titled The Nomadic Soul, a seeker's guide to finding a sense of self and belonging in the modern world, which highlights a profound yet often unexplored part of your identity that holds the key to everything from answering your biggest questions to finding deeper meaning and joy in everyday life. Visit thenomadicsoulbook.com to learn more, download a free chapter, or to buy a copy. Do you feel that certain emotions are encouraged and certain emotions are discouraged these days? Because I feel like we're being kind of, I guess, socialized to look a certain way, especially in the public. So, our online presence and even amongst our friends, to always put on this brave front and to always be happy and seem like we have the perfect life. And I'm wondering what impact that would have on how we show up in the world. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, definitely. There's this new trend these days in social media, right? There either people showing their best life and happiest life ever, or other people showing their sadness and whatever is going through with them. But I feel definitely positive what looks like positive emotions is what appeals most. But I saw a very interesting interview. You know, Mr. Beast?
Yes.
He's like the biggest YouTuber.
Yes.
The biggest.
Yes.
Like, and he was saying that he makes all these videos to be happy, to bring happiness to people, but he was feeling very depressed.
Diary of a CEO? Was it that interview?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was shocking, you know. He's like, yeah, I put a front face, but deep inside I'm sad. And what a contradiction. So what are your thoughts?
And there's also cancel culture, right? It's like you don't want to offend anybody with any controversial statements, what people would perceive as controversial statements. The mob will come out to get you if you are honest about, you know, about your opinion about certain things going on in the world. So it's like finding that sweet spot. It's like you cannot please everybody. So it's like you're under that pressure. So many forces that are impacting us these days.
I'd agree. I think coming back to your initial question about whether some emotions are encouraged or discouraged over others, throughout time I've seen, you know, society's much more comfortable with happiness and joy and, you know, the lighter emotions, let's call them, in the wheel. And when it comes to anger or rage or jealousy or, you know, the shadows, let's call them the scary shadows, they can be less welcomed in certain circles depending on where you are. I mean, I know some friends would completely disagree with me and say, no, bring it on. Like, we want to see all of the emotions. But I know if you had a tantrum in the middle of a supermarket, so more people would like have a look at you instead of if you were just laughing your head off, people would probably just walk on by. Whether or not that's a sign of the times, I'm not sure. I think for me, it's just human nature. And maybe it's got something to do with evolution. I've not really looked into the history or science behind it, but something to do with bonding, being able to create connections and protect your tribe. And maybe that's how we've learnt to gravitate towards the easier emotions, let's say, because it creates connection and togetherness. And those other ones perhaps were perceived in the past as what you use when there's a threat. I don't agree with that at all today.
Yeah, they say don't be a Debbie Downer or like...
Exactly.
You know, they use expressions like that.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think again it's back to choosing who to share with, when, what, and how. You know, and sometimes you will be surprised, even in social media. Sometimes if you share, like, people connect through vulnerability and people connect through sharing and expressing. Then, do you always want to show the bad, or do you want to find the right balance? Or I think, but as you were saying, these days it's like we have to check what are we sharing, how are we sharing, and you were saying we have to try not to hurt anybody. I'm tired of that. I don't want to be diplomatic. Like we have become to a point where we are so diplomatic and we try to check everybody's box that we lose the authenticity and we lose ourselves. Because if I think, what you will think, what will she think, then I'm losing. What do I think? What do I feel?
Yeah, you just censor yourself to the point where you lose your individuality.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good point.
I think it's all about balance once again.
Yeah. I think there's also an importance to your point, make a distinction between, like you said, feeling safe to share, but also repression versus expression versus suppression, right? Because there are times where you might feel something, but you don't feel like it's the right place for you to share, right? You're choosing in that moment to suppress it, but you will express it on your own terms when you are ready, right?
Interesting, yeah.
However, if you were to disconnect and disassociate from that feeling, where you are to point not even aware that you're feeling it, you're repressing it and you're not aware. And I think that is where danger can lie, because the lack of cognitive connection to your feelings, and I know Gabor Mate talks about this a lot as well, where he says that, it actually impacts the secretion of our stress hormones, like you talked about cortisol earlier. And that, in essence, can also then have a knock-on on our immune system. And that can have a knock-on on how we deal with infections or, things that are going on in our body that are damaging our DNA. So there's this whole other school of thought that really talks about the power of repression and how that can impact our health in the long run. But actively choosing when to share and saying, right, it's my time to say something, and okay, if that person is a little bit cut up by it, maybe they need to hear that at the time. Maybe that is something that will create better connection down the line, and at least you have not held back in a way that is damaging yourself. And that is very important to me through my own healing journey, noticing when in life I had repressed versus showing up in a space where I know I will be heard, even though it's a difficult conversation, but it will serve down the line because this is important to me and we're fighting for something good, or we're sharing for something, togetherness, or just to get it out,
I think we're coming down with the formula
I
for
know.
emotional
And
expression.
I was just thinking about, do I always have to share? Because sometimes I feel like I can just handle it myself, self-regulation.
Yeah.
As someone who's more introverted, I sometimes prefer to process it on my own before
and that's your MO.
Like journaling, speaking to my therapist, or just giving it some form before I actually share it with somebody.
Yeah.
If it's just like a blob of emotions, I'm not sure if the person would know what to do with that.
Yeah.
Not everyone has that level of emotional intelligence, and I'm not trying to be like superior here or anything. So I like to personally make sense of how I feel before
you share.
Before I share, rather than just be like, well, this is what I'm feeling. Oh my God, what happened? And I mean, that also has its place when you're venting.
Yeah.
You kind of need to do that, especially if someone you love and trust and who can hold that space for you. But personally, I like to make sense of what's going on.
But me too, I do that. If it's what is considered as a negative emotion.
Yeah.
What is considered.
It's like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I like that. Me, I take my walks.
Yeah.
And then I will come back to the person whenever. But it's true. I like, okay, I'm feeling the right. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to let it sit. And maybe in 1 or 2 days, I will express it.
Yes.
Because otherwise, I'm not giving anything good at the moment.
Yeah.
Whenever I can. Because I'm not perfect. And some days you just burst.
Yeah. You're
Yes.
just human.
We're just human.
Yeah.
Like,
That pause
We need
is
to
essential.
vent. Sometimes we need to just vent. Yeah.
Can I say something?
Sure. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So earlier when you were talking about whether everybody has the same capability of sharing and not, or emotional dictionary, it really made me think of human design and color psychodynamics. So in human design, there's a channel called the emotional channel or non-emotional channel. And some people, depending on whether you believe it or not, have the ability to, they're non-emotional. That doesn't mean they don't feel, but it means that they feel other people's emotions for them. So they might absorb in a conversation.
Empathic?
Correct. And amplify it. So they create energy like that, or they create a connection. But they need to be very careful of, therefore, who they surround themselves with and how they show up in crowds, because
They're like sponges.
without knowing, they can sponge.
Yeah.
Versus others who are emotional, they might just wake up in a mood one day and they have no idea why, and they just need to like go out and take it out of them and express it, and that's their way of moving in the world. And when I learnt that, I found that so fascinating, because I'd never really thought about that in that context. I thought either you are emotional or you're not, or you do have that dictionary or you don't. But seeing how it can change depending on the way it moves through your body or how you process it, that's why I thought when you were talking about processing, was fascinating. And in color psychodynamics, there's also, we each have a color that we're born with and a color DNA. And that is incredibly fascinating when you see that, because the way we show up, therefore, based on our own unique color DNA, can really influence how we move through the world emotionally as well as intellectually and so on and so forth. So
Where
I don't
can
think
people
it's all
find out?
equal.
Yes, how can we find out our color
Come
DNA?
and talk to me after the show.
Okay. No, I mean, if it's a resource that people
Color psychodynamics, yes,
want
he
to
was
look
on my
into.
show. So if you go check out his Instagram, which is I Am Color for Life, and his name is Mark Wentworth, and he developed this typology called color psychodynamics profiling, and it's incredibly fascinating.
And can you tell when you see people now which color? Like, oh,
You'd
you could
have
be
to
a
read
Libra.
their chart.
Huh?
You'd have to read their chart, yeah. So I can, once I've qualified, I'm studying it at the moment, but yeah, you would be able to read their chart and tell them and help them. And it works across businesses, it works across people, it works across, pets and homes and everything.
Interesting.
So very interesting.
Can you tell intuitively? Because
No. It's
Yeah.
an actual reading. It's not one of those
it's
like,
not one of those.
I'm feeling your energy.
No, I asked that because I have been studying astrology since I was a teenager, and now I seem to have a knack of like figuring out the elements that someone is displaying.
like that.
Yeah, I can even.
Okay, in that
You know
sense,
what I
you
mean?
probably
Like
can
you
get
feel
a feel.
like fire, but I feel like you got a moon that is water. Like I can point that out.
Okay, so in that sense, you can pick up on cues.
I can pick up on cues.
Yes, on cues. Yes, you would be able to once you know the profiling very well. Like you'd have to be studied it for quite a while.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
Like you studied
here's an
astrology.
example. I watched Usher, the concert. He had a concert in Abu Dhabi a couple of days ago. And I looked at him and I just felt like, God, this man has a lot of Scorpio in his chart. Sure enough,
He's a Scorpio.
he's a Venus and Mars Scorpio. And I thought, and I knew he was a Pisces moon because he had that dreaminess. The point I'm trying to make is having tools like, the one you talked about the color and astrology, or, if you don't believe in it, I'm sure there are other typologies, personality types.
Yeah.
Just having that can help you decipher your emotional landscape and other people's emotional landscape.
I feel like we're talking like we're astronauts, and there are people that don't even know where the moon is. You know what I mean?
What do you mean exactly?
Well, that's what I was saying. Like we have to, like, if somebody has never heard of these topics, for some people, if somebody just comes and watches the show, they were like, what are they talking about? So I feel like we should say, okay, the first step is understanding what's going on with you, because if you are not attuned with your own emotions, you cannot, we're talking a very expert level.
I'm pretty confident that people listening to these type of podcasts have some level of emotional intelligence and awareness. I mean, they're definitely more than the average person.
Well, they also see them as prompts for tools to know yourself better, right? So they can pick and choose whatever they like. It's just an option.
Yeah.
And that self-awareness can come from the curiosity to explore all these things. But I like that you brought us back down to the ground, because we were floating up.
Which I love, but I was thinking, okay, imagine this is my cousin and she's never heard of any of this. Will this be helpful for her? What is the level? Because now Venus and Pisces and Scorpio, I love it, but I'm like,
That's why I give a disclaimer. That's why I give a disclaimer. If it doesn't work for you, there are other non-woo-woo tools that you can use.
Yeah. But no, Gen Z are all over that.
Oh, they are. Yeah. New Age is really
It's the now age.
Is the now age, pretty much. Yeah. One more thing I wanted to talk about is how emotional, being comfortable with sharing our feelings, how that's changed over the years and over history. Because I can think of certain times in history where it was discouraged, and they were viewed with suspicion. They were viewed with, they were very cautious about feelings in general, and it was sometimes seen as a kind of madness. Certain times, like medieval times and Victorian times, it's like a stiff upper lip, like don't talk anything, like especially the women. So I think we should realize that the freedom that we have now would be considered a luxury. 50 years ago even. You know, to have that voice and to really be able to you know, feel our feelings and share that with other people. So I think that's something worth pointing out so that people can see that as a privilege rather than something that's just, it's just
to be taken for granted.
Taken for granted because, you know, our grandmothers or they probably did not have that opportunity to really speak up and share themselves in a way that felt healing to them. So.
It makes me wonder. It makes me wish actually that I could have asked my grandma this question and also asked her about her grandma and, you know, just to understand their experiences more. I was too young when she passed to be able to ask her those kind of deep questions. But I am really thinking about it now because it would have been fascinating to understand her lived experience of emotion, not just my perception of it, which I think would have been quite limited. I know though she wasn't comfortable with certain emotions being expressed because she was the one that told me that it was a sign of weakness.
There you go.
But at the same time, she was incredibly loving and nurturing and a very safe space. So I would have liked to unpack that further with her because I don't think that's the whole conversation. I think that's only part of what she was trying to teach me, but I was too young to know the rest of it, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't feel like I'm in a space to be able to call it one way or the other right now. But I just know that, there's more to that story, I feel.
I am very lucky to still have my grandma alive. She's 90 and very healthy. And sometimes I ask her these questions and she's like, what you talk about therapy and positivity and all these things, they didn't exist when I was young. And she was telling me, well, especially in Spain, we had a civil war. So she was like, I grew up between bombs and we didn't have food to eat. And, you know, and people were dying left and right. And I feel like she's got that anger, which is like sadness, you know, for the things she lived, like bless her. And sometimes it's like, when I was little, there was no psychologist and these things. You have these days where you talk and express your feelings, where you suck it up and continue with the day because we had, you know.
And Maslow's hierarchy.
Yeah, exactly. They were like on the basis.
Like 1, 2, like just surviving.
And sometimes I try like, no, grandma, but you know, and my mom, she's like, Laura, she's 90. She's 90. Like, you have to accept them for who they are and just roll with it, you know, and accept them and love them and understand that they didn't have the tools. Like, we are living truly in a privileged era.
Yeah, especially for women.
Yeah. But if anybody has their grandma, talk to them.
Yeah, 100%. Interview them.
Yeah.
Get your questions ready and just go for it. Honestly, don't hold back because it's gold.
I think, again, personality and culture plays a big part in this. Like my grandmother, she was a very strong woman and she would tell you like it is. So, but she owned a farm in India and she was working there. Like she was like the boss. So I think that was just her nature, even though she was living in the times when women were, you know, kind of subjugated and not really taken seriously. But she was one of those fiery women. And she actually told me, it's like, you know, you got to be independent. Don't depend on a man. Like, have a mind of your own. Like, I was like, whoa, okay. It's like, I was not expecting that.
My grandma tells me the same.
My grandma told me the same.
Really?
Really?
Yeah. Oh.
I feel like they're in this room now.
Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
She was always telling me, have your own house, make your own money.
I think they're trying to live their dreams like through us because they weren't able to do that and they want to see us.
Yeah.
I think in my scenario, my grandma did do that. And she was very much head of the household, very much in control of things, very much independent in that sense.
Yeah.
And perhaps that happened later in her life. I don't know, maybe, again, that's why I would like to unpack that question with her, because maybe there was a part of her life where she didn't have that. I don't know. But it definitely came from somewhere. But the grandmother I knew when I came into the world was very much, you know, her own, the master of herself and the master of the family. And it was like the matriarch of the house. So, yeah.
I think that also comes with age, right? As you develop that confidence in yourself and you see more of life, you gain that wisdom.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so I think that's it. I think we've covered a lot of ground today. Thank you so much, Laura and Sahar. It was such a pleasure learning from both of you. I actually learned a lot, as I did in the last discussion. So I'm sure our audience is going to really resonate with everything that you shared, all those brilliant tools and insights. So I'm grateful.
I'm super grateful to you both too. I love the way that we flow and I like the different perspectives that we bring to the table. And every time the discussion has something fun and giggly about it, which always appeals to the joker in me. So thank you for entertaining me in that way.
To me, it fits the fun and the depth. To me, both of you really ground me. So it's like, I think we've come into a very sweet spot like this.
I know. We're sinking, ladies. We're sinking.
Thank you so
by
much.
the third one, I think we'll be like, okay, so I just want to let our listeners know if you are interested in checking out Sahar Milani's podcast, The Mindful Makers, and Laura's speaking services and programs, you will find all those links in the show notes.